Hi, and welcome to the Passionistas Project podcast. We're Amy and Nancy Harrington. If you enjoy listening to the show, please consider becoming a patron. Just a small donation of $1 a month can help us keep the project going, and you'll get rewards like buttons, access to premium content, and invites to Passionistas Project events. Today we're talking to DeMane Davis, filmmaker, commercial director, and currently producing director of the critically acclaimed drama series Queen Sugar on OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network. So please welcome to the show, DeMane Davis. What's the one thing you're most passionate about?
What I'm passionate about is helping people to identify and follow their own passions and their own paths. So I have a lot of friends who often are interested in different things and they'll ask my opinion, or even now being in this position on Queen Sugar, there are people on Instagram who will say, well, how can I find this job? I really like writing, but what's the best way for me to go about it? You know, I had a friend who got married and said, well, we're going to have a baby. And I said, well, did you go to Paris yet? Because you always said you wanted to go to Paris. I'm really doubtful that you're going to be like, walking around the Eiffel Tower with an infant. So maybe go to Paris before you have a baby. That's, a good idea. So that's become a passion of mine. And that's become something that I'm relatively good at doing and I enjoy doing. So I think that's partially what I like to do. And I think if I can help someone find out what they do and what they like about it, and if they can make a living at it, then it makes that person happier. And then ultimately, everyone gets a little bit happier. Instead of being miserable for 40 hours a week, you're a little bit happier, at least for maybe 20 of those hours, because you're doing something that you truly like to do. So, and if everybody gets happier, then we're all happy.
How does that translate more specifically into what you do day to day at your job?
Being producing director on Queen Sugar, it's one of the most incredible things that I've done or will do in my career. And I'm responsible for the look of the show and I'm responsible for the story. And so I'm that person who sometimes the writer's on set, sometimes they're not on set. I make sure that the intent that the writer wanted comes out visually, comes out in these takes, comes out in these episodes. And since there's a different female director for every episode, I'm sort of that touchstone to make sure, well, this is what the show is and this is what the show isn't. And really what Ava has created is a place where you get to live your dream of being a director and directing television for the first time. Every member of the crew is an incredibly skilled craftsperson, but also really creative. But they're all there to help these directors make their episodes. And so what I am tasked with, which I don't even think it's a task, is I just go to them every day and I say, well, what is it that you want to get today? And what is it that you need to tell the story? And this is how I'm going to help you get that. And so how is this material translating through you? And then how do you want to translate that to the screen? And it's great because they're already in a happy place because they get to do this, and just being there and being on set is a really happy place. It's it's stressful, it's fast, but it's also an incredible environment.
Talk about the significance of Ava's decision to use exclusively female directors on Queen Sugar and why that's important.
The way that I've heard her tell the story is that she started to make a list of directors for the first season, and then she realized that they were all women, and then she, went to Oprah and said, like, I think I'm going to do this. Are you into this? And Oprah was like, yeah, let's do it, And so that became her thing. And what it does essentially is it changes the entire game. I think what both Oprah and Ava have allowed us to do is to see ourselves where we couldn't before. And when you get to a set and you see that not only every director is a woman, but we have a female director of photography. Our production supervisor is a woman. Our production designer is a woman. Wardrobe, casting director, just there's so many women there. And that makes you feel comfortable. There's a level of you not worrying about having to be or do anything, but be yourself and to do the work. So you don't have to worry about pretense, or you don't have to worry about someone perhaps coming in with an attitude, or someone coming in with a version of what the way they think that things should be, because the people who Ava have hired in these positions are all there at service to the script and at the service of the director to bring their vision to life. It's pretty incredible. And I was just mentioning this to someone else. My first real job was in advertising. I always wanted to be a copywriter, but I got into advertising through being a secretary in the media department. And I remember when I was filling out the application for the Sundance Episodic Labs, it's a television workshop that they have that's, part of the Institute. They asked an essay question, why do you want to have a TV series? Why would you want to create a TV series? And in the course of me writing that 150 or 300 word essay, I realized that the reason why I was a secretary, and I remember seeing the ad and the want ads for secretary, and I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. The reason why I knew I could do that is because when I was little, I used to love a TV show called Mannix. And Mannix was a private detective, and he had a secretary named Peggy, and she was Black. And I remember watching that show and being like, oh, well, what's she doing? She's answering phones, she's filing papers, she's typing, she's getting lunch. Oh, I could do that. Yeah, I could be a secretary. And so that's why it's important to see women, to see people of color in other professions everywhere, all the time, because you really don't know how that truly programs you and how that affects you. And it lets you know that that's okay. I belong here. I can do this. Oh, you're here? Oh, I can be here too. And so that's what Ava has done. She said, no, you belong here. You can be here, and we're all going to help you make this. And she's exceptional at looking at someone and saying, I believe in you, you can do this, and then fulfilling their dream.
Talk a little bit about how you personally got onto the show and how your role evolved.
Ava reached out to me on Twitter, the Twitter email, a couple of years ago. And I was, just completely like shell shocked. I remember I was freelancing at an ad agency, and my art director partner was like, what's wrong? What's going on? And I was like, we're going to have beer at lunch. That's what's going on. I just got an email. And we kept in touch, and she asked me to participate in Array Day. So her releasing company, Array, which purchases films at different film festivals and puts them out for distribution. They have this event where anyone on Twitter can ask a question, and you get these little half-hour slots, and anyone can ask a question of the filmmakers that she picks. And she said, would you want to be involved? Yes, of course, absolutely, whatever you want me to do. And so I did that for the second year in a row. And just before I, was logging in, she emailed me. She said, thanks so much for doing this for me. And I was like, yes, of course, whatever you need, love and light. And I remember when she answered me back, it was a few days later, maybe a week later, and she answered with a little yellow heart. And I was like, all right, don't respond. Should I respond? I really want to respond. I just want to, what am I going to, no, don't bother. You can't bother. She's really important. She's really busy. What are you doing? Just leave it alone. And that day I got a phone call, and that was from Paul Garnes, who's the executive producer of Queen Sugar. And he was like, yeah, Ava call you? And I was like, oh yeah, no, she's sitting here. We're just eating Pringles, watching. Oh yeah, she wants you to direct episode 206. And I was floored. And so then I kept saying yes. I was actually, I'd broken my ankle. So I was sitting on the couch. I just got my cast off, and my foot was up on pillows. And when he's saying, so you're going to come down to Louisiana? I just kept looking at my ankle going, yep, no, yeah, no, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. And I mentioned to Kat Candler, who was producing director season 2 and showrunner now, season 3. And she was the only person I told that I was on crutches. And she was like, oh, and I was like, yeah, but it's totally okay. Cause I'm in PT and it's great. It's fine. I just, whatever. And then when I got there, I remember people in the office were like, hey, what's going on? I was like, nothing's going on. Everything's fine. So, and I just, it's like, was I going to say no? I wasn't going to say no. So I directed episode 206. And then Ava graciously asked me to come back and do episode 215. And then last August, she called me and said, I want you to be producing director for season 3. And that began the whirlwind. Since season 2, that began the whirlwind of my life being involved in this incredible show.
Tell us a little bit about your path to becoming a director and some of the challenges you had to overcome to do that.
I started as a secretary in the media department. I knew I wanted to be a copywriter. I've always known that I was a writer and keeping a journal since I was 12 years old, and hadn't finished college. So once I saw that there was this job to be the secretary, I was like, oh, this is cool. Maybe I'm going to get in there. I'm going to be a copywriter. That's what I'm going to do. I remember setting my intent, which was interesting because it's not something I knew that I was doing, but it's now something that I do all the time. I was like, I'm going to become a copywriter at this agency. So I did. I worked I had an incredible boss, a woman named Rowena Alston, who the first day I started being her secretary in the media department said, "What is it you want to do?" And I said, "I really think I want to be a copywriter. That's what I'd love to do if that opportunity happens." And she said, "Okay, great." And a year after, the copywriter position hadn't opened up, but a position opened up in the creative department to sort of wrangle and handle all of the award show entries and also to be assistant to a pretty big creative duo. At the time, they came up with the John Hancock Real Life Real Answers campaign and this Infinity campaign where they never showed the car. It was very controversial. And so she was like, "Yeah, go. No, that's what you want." So I did that. And people started to sort of feed me little assignments and I would do some radio spots here and there. And then I was made a copywriter. And then sometime in there, I went to go visit my niece and she wasn't there. And so I left her a note in her bedroom. And I remember just before I left, I looked, she had all these photos on the wall and she also had all of these funeral programs on her wall. And she'd never said anything to me about it, but in the course of like a year and a half, she had lost 4 close friends, and it was all related to violence. So she had 2 friends who were shot in their heads as they sat in their car. She had a very good friend who was stabbed in school during school hours, and I was like, "What?" At the time I was speaking out through Boston Partners in Education. I was going around and speaking at different schools and talking about career options and advertising and stuff. And I was like, what else can I do? I'll make a movie. I'm going to make a movie. That's the best way to get this message out there. So I started to write a script, and the art director I was working with was like, "I want to do it." So I enlisted him because I knew that would get us this other guy. So we enlisted him, and I knew that that guy would get us equipment. So we got a producer and we got the equipment. And so that's how I made my first film, which was called Black and White and Red All Over. And that went to Sundance. And then my second feature after that was Lift, that starred Kerry Washington. And then after that, I did have an agent and some scripts came in, but nothing sort of really clicked. There was kind of that thought of, well, if you want to be in the business, you've got to be in New York or LA. And obviously I'm neither. I was here in Boston. And so things sort of died down, but I was still directing commercials, which is great because it's just like a film or just like television. You've got a crew, have a script, you're getting an idea across. And I was cool with doing that. And I do remember saying quite a few times, I have a bunch of journals, 70 actually, but I have one that I just kind of put in all of my intents and things that I want. And I have in there, you're going to have a TV series and you're going to direct and you're going to do all this stuff. That was always a plan. And I was sort of trying to work towards that, but none of that would have happened, certainly without Ava, and certainly not as fast.
What were the challenges of being a woman, and specifically an African-American woman, on your journey, and how has that maybe changed in recent years?
I think that's always a challenge, right? And it's sort of like, even just thinking about Me Too, these are just things that we know innately, situations that we may have been in or that friends have been in, but there's no talking about it. You just kind of, as women, we put it down and we just go on and do what we have to do. Now I think it's a lot easier to think back and to be like, oh yeah, that was kind of weird, or that was it. But at the time, going through all that kind of stuff, there were a couple of things that sort of stuck out, but not too many things, because I was just like, there's nothing that I can do about this other than continue to push and continue to strive and continue to do my job. Certainly, I don't want to let it stop me. But yeah, there were meetings. There was a presentation I made where a guy implied that I was at the pitch. So we were pitching a business, and the art director I was working with, our campaign won to be the main campaign that was presented. And you're in this giant dark room, like an amphitheater, and you're pitching the business. And afterwards, a guy came up to me and he was like, "Hey, that was really good." And I said, "Thanks so much." And he goes, "How long have you been with the company?" And it just so happened I had only been there for, a couple of months. And I was like, "A couple of months." And he was like, "Oh, okay." And he walked away. And I was like, that was weird. And then I remember I went to my creative director and mentioned it to him. And he was like, "Oh, he did that because you're Black." And I was like, he did? I try not to think sort of in that realm. And I was like, oh. So he was implying that they hauled me out because it was a better look. So, there are things like that. There's all kinds of, the sexism is rampant, especially in advertising. I think there's sort of environment that it's very carefree. And if you have a beer account, everybody's drinking beer. And if you have, what I mean, there's lots of travel and stuff like that. But these are all things that I think in the end, I did what most women do, which is like, well, I'm not going to really not going to let that stop me. That's not going to prevent me from doing what it is that I have to do. And I'm grateful now to, as turbulent as these times are, to be here to see a time where we can talk about these things a little bit more in the open, but also we have the support of each other because we are now more apt to discuss it as opposed to, just kicking it under the rug and letting it fester.
We're Amy and Nancy Harrington, and you're listening to the Passionistas Project podcast in our interview with DeMane Davis, producing director of Queen Sugar. Don't miss the last few weeks of Season 3 on OWN, Wednesdays at 10, 9 Central. Now here's more of our conversation with DeMane.
Is there one lesson you've learned on your journey that's sort of stuck with you through your career so far?
If there's one thing that I now know, it's that in the end, all of it is fodder. And I'm fortunate that I'm a writer, so I can use all of it, even the things that I've just expressed to you, the things that I do remember that don't remember that might pop up at some point. I can give those experiences to a character, and I can then hopefully help people with that. So all of it is something that I can take. I think as long as these things that happen in your life, certainly you go through them, you experience them, you celebrate them, you mourn them. Then if you can give yourself a beat to kind of step outside it so that you don't get so wrapped up in it, especially if it's a negative experience and it's something that you continue to bring with you every day into the present. If you can say to yourself, okay, I'm obviously still upset about this, but I've given that a little bit of time today and it gets no more time today. That's the past. There's nothing that I can do about it. That's what I think is the biggest thing that I can do, because you can't do anything about those things. All you can do is be present right now in this moment and be aware and take all your teachings with you, but not live so much in the past that you're truly in the past, that you're not here, that you're not present. All of that is going to prevent you from the experience, from everything that's happening right now. You're going to miss it.
Is there a moment that you do look back on in your life and your career and think, wow, that was really courageous and it completely changed the trajectory of my path?
Actually, just directing an episode of Television on Crutches was probably a pretty big thing that now it feels like it happened so long ago, but it wasn't really that long ago. But I do remember the shock on everyone else's faces when I was there. And I remember being in LA afterwards and being off the crutches and out of the boot and being in a meeting and saying that to someone and having an executive say, that was probably a really great thing. Like, think about what that looks like, that you're there on crutches and you're doing that. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess, yeah, sure. I guess that, yeah, you're right. But I have sort of logged that in my head whenever I think that I can't do something or that something's insurmountable. I'll say, no, you directed on crutches, so you're okay. Like, is this like that? Like, you did that, so you can do this. And then subsequently, being producing director for season 3 of Queen Sugar, doing that, I think, working 16, 18-hour days, being on your feet for 8 hours, having one director directing while another one is scouting, while another one is behind you shadowing, asking questions, handling all that, and then getting home and reading scripts and looking at cuts and then getting to Wednesday and then seeing an episode air. Like, I did that. At the time when Ava asked me to do it and I was sort of shell-shocked, I didn't know how all-encompassing it would be. I had an idea, but then getting down there and seeing what it was like and doing it, I did it. And I loved it. That's the other thing. I was completely addicted to it. I'm used to now I can work on 5 hours of sleep. I know that about myself. I can work on 5 hours of sleep for months at a time, 5 hours a night. Totally fine. Got this. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. And those are things, thank you for asking me that question, because these are things that I need to write down to remember when I get nervous about something, or if I get like, oh, do I think I can do that? It's like, yeah, dude, look, you did this and this. You're totally fine. You could do it. I think it's always good to have those things to point to in your life or your career to remember, because sometimes the different life events that you have are all encompassing and it doesn't allow you to look at the other stuff that you did. And it's like, no, but you did that. So of course you could do this. You're fine. You're fine. Because in the end, your biggest champion and your biggest enemy it's going to be yourself. It's going to be whether or not you talk yourself out of it or you talk yourself into it.
Were there other cultural heroines that inspired you when you were growing up?
My sister and I used to share a room, and she's a writer. And so I basically read all of her books. So, Gloria Naylor, Nikki Giovanni, of course, Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison was huge for me. So I grew up these are my family members when I was young, just reading these books over and over again. James Baldwin. Then when I started getting off of cartoons and into television, of course, Wonder Woman was huge for me. I never got underoos, the Wonder Woman underoos, but I always wanted them. That's like, oh, a woman can be a superhero. An Electra Woman and Dinah Girl. Yeah, and then Get Christy Love, who was this like black detective, that TV show. And then, of course, Gail Fisher, who played Peggy on Mannix. She sort of became, for me, an icon. Like, okay, these people are doing this. Maybe that's something that I can do.
Have you had mentors through your career, and what about them do you admire?
Certainly, Bill Heater and Don Easton, they were my bosses. I was their secretary at Hill Holiday years and years ago, and they were always really encouraging of me writing and being a copywriter and becoming a copywriter. My best friend, Risa Mickenberg, who is a writer and a playwright, a director and a screenwriter. She just wrote the script for Egg, which is on the festival circuit right now. Phenomenal movie, which started as a play. Initially, she kind of started out as a rival because we worked at the same ad agency, but we were just been told at that ad agency that there weren't going to be any bonuses and any raises given that year because the agency was doing so bad. And there was a freeze on hiring. And then she got hired like the next week. And so I was kind of like, what? Being in advertising, you're sort of taught to keep your resources to yourself because anyone else could potentially come up with an idea for what you're working on, especially if it's a pitch for a new business or something like that. A bunch of teams are working on it. You want to be that team that wins. So you never really tell people any of your sources, what websites you use, what books you use, or what movie did you get that from, or where did that, what camera did you use? And so you keep all of that to yourself. So there's that part of it. And there's also the part where we've arrived at different places as women. A lot of times when we're in a business situation, if we're the only woman in the room and another woman enters, there's that feeling of like, much like I'm saying with your resources, like competition. So it's like, who's this? I know they're only going to let one chick in here. I got to be that chick. It can't be you. It's me. We're going to fight. What we're going to do. And so when Risa came in as a copywriter and I was already a copywriter, I sort of built up all these walls in my head for why I couldn't be friendly with her. And she would ask me out and, well, let's hang out. Let's do this. And so one day she said, well, I'm having a party. And I said, okay, cool. She was like, you want to come over? I go, yeah. So we went out and then she got a pizza and then we went and we got like a 6-pack of Rolling Rock. It was our client at the time. And then I go, who else is coming to this party? And she goes, it's just you and me. And I went, what? And then we got to her apartment on Mass Ave and she put on Say Anything. And we're watching this movie. And I was so blindsided by this whole thing. I wasn't even in the room. So talk about like being present, right? Like I wasn't even there. And then I start watching the movie and then it gets to the end of the movie and I look and she's crying because she loved the movie so much. And I went, oh my God, she's a human. She's a person. What am I doing? This is so weird. Like I built this whole thing up in my head. And from that point on, we were best friends and still are. And that was, decades and decades ago. She remains a mentor for me because a lot of the things that I've done in my career, she kind of did them first. And so I was like, oh, okay, then I can do that. I'm going to do that too. So she was doing voiceovers and then I became a voiceover later on. And then, she directed a couple of things and then I started directing commercials and then did my first feature. And what's interesting about where I am now, to bring it full circle, is the thing that I learned from Ava and from Kat Candler in particular, showrunner this year, is we just share everything amongst all those directors, all those women. So keeping all your sources close to you, this is the exact opposite. What app are you using? I'm using this app and I'm using, this one. And we did, can I look at your shot list? Yeah, here are all my notes. That's the environment that Ava's created, and it's a way for all of us to come up. There is no competition. We end up being our own competition. And certainly in that space, there is no competition. And once you let that down and you realize, oh, I'm an individual, this person's not going to steal my idea, this person's not going to steal my job. There are all these insecurities that I'm putting upon it that are stopping me from being present, that are stopping me from reaching out. They're stopping me from making this friend. They're blocking me off from this opportunity. And so that's something that I learned when I finally got out of my head. And Brisa, who is still a mentor to me and a very, very close personal friend, that's something that I realized when I stopped doing that. And that's something that I was reinforced by being on set with Ava and Kat and having them just say, no, we're sharing all of it. Kat Candler sent out an email last week with, all the directors' names on it. It was just like, let's keep this thread going. If you guys have questions about meetings or agents or projects, let's all keep each other in the loop. And that's beautiful. And that's the way that it should be.
Do you have a secret to a rewarding life?
I think just being grateful. It's harder to be down and it's harder to be angry if you're grateful, if you at least start there. So, I start my morning with I have a long list of people and I say their names and I say how I'm grateful for them and I surround them in light and it makes me think of them and it makes me think of why I'm here and the work that I need to do. And that just sort of sets my day off in a positive place because at the end of the day, regardless of if you missed a train or a bus or if someone cut you off or if you didn't get that particular job or you didn't get that donut that you wanted because someone else picked the donut up, what's more important is that you're here and you have life and if you got a place to live, if you do have a car, even though someone cut you off, be grateful. If you didn't get that particular project that you want, but you still have a job, be grateful for it. You have a job. I think that there's a way to look at it where you can think there are all these things that I want that I don't have, but just flip it. Look at what you do have and be grateful for that. That's a good place to start. For me, that's when rewards come in. And that's also when you can start to pinpoint and hone it down to what you do really want and what you do really need.
Do you have a mantra that you live by?
One of my mantras when I feel like I'm getting anxious about time is I say, there's time enough for me to do everything that I need to do. And I just keep saying that as opposed to being like, oh my God, it's getting late. I'm never going to bed. No, there's time. There's plenty of time. This is one, if you surrender to the air, you could ride on it. That's Toni Morrison. And one of my favorites, if your dream only includes you, it's too small. That's Ava DuVernay.
What's your definition of success?
For me personally, it's just kind of looking at where I am. And it's little victories, It's like, all right, I worked out today. That's good. I didn't eat anything too bad. I'm getting work done today, which is good. I'm cleaning up. I just came off of this incredible experience that I've had the privilege of doing. So for me, that's success. And I think that any day that you're here, any day that you're alive and you can draw breath and you can be present and get out and help someone that's not yourself in any capacity, to me, that's success. I know that it's a revolving thing. I don't think in terms of I'll be happy when I have this. I think I'm already happy right now. So I don't think, well, I'll be successful when I have this. I look at what I've achieved thus far and I look at what I've done today and I'm like, yeah, that's successful. I was successful today. That was a good day.
Thanks for listening to the Passionistas Project podcast and our interview with DeMane Davis. Don't miss the last few weeks of Season 3 of Queen Sugar on the Oprah Winfrey Network, Wednesdays at 10, 9 Central. And be sure to subscribe to the Passionistas Project podcast so you don't miss any of our upcoming inspiring guests.